Hi, welcome. I am Ginnie Graham, the editorials editor at the Tulsa World Opinion section, and I am here with
Doucette, an editorial writer with the Tulsa World.
Thank you for coming back to us. This
Yay.
video is also available on podcast. You can get Google, Apple, and Spotify. So we're just going to dive right in. One of the interesting stories that I sort of got thinking about was one on the grocery tax. There is a movement to get rid of our taxes on groceries, which I think pulls something like 357 million from our budget, something like that. But
is that all?
Something, because we love cutting revenue, not so much making up for it in other ways. But in this debate, they got sidetracked with rotisserie chicken. Yes. So, and the whole debate was, is rotisserie chicken a meal or the ingredient? And I feel like I'm back on like watching a Seinfeld episode. Is this a meal? Is it a meal or is it an ingredient? So I am thinking hard about this and all of the ways I have used a rotisserie chicken. I think it's an ingredient. I think I can save the lawmakers a lot of pain. I'm going to go on the record and say I buy it and I use it in other things. For instance, a great chicken and dumpling, a chicken pot pie. So this is heavy thinking here, Bob.
It is. That's a staple around here. We get those rotisserie chickens. I make chicken tacos, chicken anything, whatever. I'll just take something off the bone and say, okay, we're going to throw this in there, and I'll throw a little rice on the side and something else, and that's a meal to me. But
welcome to our cooking show, everybody.
Yeah, it's good stuff. And thanks for bringing this up at like an hour before lunch, you jerk.
So is it an ingredient? It's an ingredient for you.
Yeah, well, it's an ingredient for me. I understand the point of like not wanting to compete against restaurants, but yeah, we were kind of dealing with weighty issues.
Well, I think
weighty
the whole
issues
debate,
on the legislative floor
is they wanted you have to define what grocery is. And this has been a debate in food stamps or SNAP for years, decades, that if you have a SNAP benefit, you can't use it on rotisserie chicken because it's considered a prepared meal and you can't use that for prepared meal. So it's the same debate. We want to take away taxes on groceries, but is that a grocery? And so if you go back to your deli section where they might have a pizza and it's already made, and all you got to do is heat it up, so things sound great until you get into the details. And how much time did this take up on the House floor or the Senate floor? I can't remember which one it was.
I don't know, but all I can tell you is how can it be a prepared meal if there's not a carb? I mean, for me, it's protein, carb, veggie. It's one of the three. It's not all three. What are you doing here, guys? Why are we talking about this? Why are we not talking about the $350 million budget hole this is going to make?
Exactly. How are we going to make up for that? And
more CARES Act money.
I don't like taxes. Let's be honest. I don't like it, but I also really like having the highway patrol and schools and all the other things that we provide with that. So
you know what I don't like? I don't like potholes. Potholes are bad. Potholes.
Have you ever ruined one of your cars with a pothole?
I'm pretty sure I've wasted a couple tires on I-40 before.
Just goes all through you. I have sent some serious damage to the axle. Is that what they call it? The thing that holds the anyway. Yes. See, I'll pay the tax on the rotisserie chicken if I don't have to take my car in. So
did we just go from like a cooking channel to being a car talk?
Oh, that would be bad. We should not do that.
I would be totally down for a car talk episode. We can talk 4-wheel drives. I can do that for like a day for sure.
I do think we should talk about how we need to be checking on our parents and grandparents who might be leaning toward the fringe right now, because the other fun story, not fun, it was a pain in the back for some city councilors, but this week, a couple of Tulsa city councilors were surprised because they were flooded with all this correspondence and calls of angry people saying that they don't want their voice taken away. That was how it was phrased. And apparently, senatorial candidate and pastor Jackson Laymeyer, out of nowhere, told his supporters on social media that they needed to flood Tulsa City Council Hall this week and get your voice back because they're going to basically take away citizen comments, which was not true. That's not ever been discussed. It was out of nowhere. And so now it's a good thing they did contact their city councilors before going to the meeting on Thursday, because how disappointing. But it is just like, that's where, I mean, we're at a place where we have to remind people, political candidates might not tell the truth. They might. It's like my uncle tells a story and I know half of it I'm just not going to believe. That's sometimes how politicians are. They exaggerate. They don't tell the truth.
And not everything on the internet is true.
But honestly, Bob, I mean, when you read that, I mean, I don't know what to say to that anymore.
Well, Jackson loves him some social media attention.
It's going to get worse this season. Yes,
it is. And I think especially, I mean, realistically speaking, from a strategery standpoint of view in your campaign, is anybody making any inroads on James Langford's reelection campaign? No. So this kind of freebie attention grabbing, headline making, base firing, upping, that's not really a word, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, it plays to the crowd.
Yeah, it plays to the crowd and makes it look like you have some relevance in what's going on here. So sure, yeah, okay. But yeah, that's not true.
City Councilor Phil Lakin did, and he's conservative, but he pushed back. He got on there. It's like, this is not true. Don't waste your time. And I think they were talking about, I mean, half of City Hall stuff is boring stuff. It's potholes, important but boring. They're not taking your voice away. So
budgets. Oh, and guess how many people showed up?
None.
Zero, at least not on that issue.
And even Mr. Laymeyer himself didn't show up, so not that important to him. But speaking of politicians, which we speak of a lot, the state of the state was this week, and we had a podcast earlier talking about it. But it sort of inspired you to write an interesting column for this weekend about this whole movement and it's basically dismantling public education. That people are now looking at it saying, well, it's broken, so we're just going to get rid of it. And it's broken, and we're going to do, and that's always been sort of I thought it was a conspiracy theory at one point that's not true. They're not purposely setting it up to fail. But you're writing this column that does sort of track back 30 years to that. And so I just, you had some good lines in there, but where did you sort of go with it? I mean, you tell us a little bit more about your thinking behind that.
Well, where do we start?
Well, started with House Bill 1017.
So when I was, this goes back a ways. You're talking 1990.
I was a senior in high school.
Yeah, we're talking 1990. So this goes back a little ways, and people were understanding our public school system was suffering. So you went to a bit of a smaller school than I did. I went to Union School, so it's pretty big high school. And at that time, we were pushing 30 to 35 kids in a classroom, and people saw stuff like that and the disparities in pay and all the other problems that were surfacing in public education. We got to do something about it. It's coming to a head. Teachers were starting to get organized and let their voices be heard. So House Bill 1017 comes up, and it funds a whole bunch of different things. There was a bit of a tax increase that went with it. And I'm thinking when it passed, they're going to say, oh yeah, even these big schools are going to have like class size limitations of 24 or less. These kids are going to be spoiled. This is going to be amazing and stuff like that. And from the jump, after that was passed, and it was passed in a bipartisan measure, signed by a Republican governor, almost from the jump, they tried to repeal it. Of course, that failed and went to a vote of the people. But then they passed State Question 640, which made it really, I'm not going to say impossible to pass a tax increase, but pretty close to it.
Explain what it is. Was that the one that required a 60%?
Yes, it requires 75% approval of the legislature, or 2/3 of a vote of the people, I believe, to pass a tax increase.
But you
And
don't
that
need
was
that to reduce taxes. It just takes
right.
a simple
Yes.
majority. Yeah.
So that was and state question 640 was definitely a reaction to House Bill 1017. And you go through the years since then, since 1990, and it has been this steady chipping away at public education to the point where we reached crisis levels in 2018. And then once again, it took the teachers and the public just to say, enough, we've got to fix these problems. So the legislature grudgingly started putting together a tax package that passed that SQ 640 threshold to give teacher raises. But there's still a lot of problems left undone. And now we're hearing, well, we funded record amounts of da 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 in the public education and it's not working. So we're just going to throw away the whole thing. And I've used some analogies in this column, but one that sticks out to me is you come into a situation and someone says, here's a car, here's how it runs. Keep this for a while and make sure it's running right. So the owner of the car, instead of taking care of the car and investing with it, opens up the hood, takes a sledgehammer and starts wailing away on the thing, shuts the hood, starts it up. It's not running right. He says, well, this stinks. Give me another car. That's what we're doing with public education right now.
I think you noted that some of the public education's biggest critics are also the ones who are passing bills that harm public education. Right. The micromanaging of what you can or can't teach. I mean, there's all of this, and they're going to still try to do some of that this year. And keep in mind, this morning there was a story that Charles McCall said, the House Speaker said that the voucher bill, there's no appetite for vouchers in the House. So that's dead there, but they're always shell bills. Nothing really ever dies. But I think rule lawmakers we should say that the state of the state, the governor and the Senate president have embraced this idea of fixing schools with vouchers, private school vouchers, a pot of money like $5,600 that would go to all private school kids, all homeschool kids, all charter school kids, charter schools are public schools. So I don't really quite understand that. But the rural schools have realized, wait, this would really hurt us. Yep. Because if you take all the existing private school kids and homeschool kids and that takes a bunch of money out. And so that's kind of the reaction to that. But, it's just, we're not a whole lot of talk about how to fix teacher pipelines and these other things that are broken. So,
Yeah, we've got a lot of things that are wrong right now. It's like you fixed or sort of fixed one problem with teacher pay, but then, the record levels of retirements and the broken teacher pipeline and the teacher shortage that we've had. And, educators are still leaving Oklahoma to go teach in places that treat them better. And we keep making things harder, not just from a fiscal standpoint, but now we're starting to throw laws in there that says, hey, you put the wrong book on the shelf, so you're going to get fined $10,000 and fired. Or if you're teaching this thing and it makes my kid feel slightly uncomfortable or might run slightly astray from our religious beliefs, and boom, you're out of here. It's hard enough to be a teacher, 6 hours in a given day, wrangling X number of students of that are coming from any kind of background and aptitude and everything else, and trying to teach them all as best you can. And you're having to take work home. And then you got all this mess going on. And it's just like the constant legislative meddling and, quite frankly, undermining public education. Yeah.
It gets to respect. We would never tell other people how to do their jobs, and we are here. And also, when we talk about the teacher walkout, that was just about teacher pay. Yeah. And clearly it wasn't enough because we still have this broken teacher pipeline. We have schools closing because we don't have enough staff to work in the schools. But that did not address the classroom environment. There were 47th in per pupil expenditure. That gets at what resources are in the classroom. That did not lessen class size. It did not add anything to the actual schools. All it did was address that salary. So there's still a lot of work, but I will say, and here's the other rub, the school board races were this past week, right? Yeah. So low voter turnout. I mean, it's ridiculous how many people complain about schools and yet they can't turn out to vote on their school board representative. And I noticed in the Union district, only 12 votes separated the first and the second person. So anyone who's and in TPS, I want to say it was less than 100. So there will be a general election in April, and we'll be reminding people, if you truly care, find out who these people are and go vote. So
yes, for sure.
Yeah, but that got me thinking about. My column this week is on these voter laws, and all across the nation, the Brennan Law Center, or the Brennan Justice Center, I'm sorry, something like that. Sorry if I get it completely wrong there, but that group nonprofit tracks all of these laws. And what was interesting, they had their report come out. Most of the states that are in these big fights over voting expansion, voting process, who's counting the votes, who's doing that, they're all in swing states. So like in Oklahoma, I mean, we've got some laws that are proposed dealing with voting, but it's just not a priority. I doubt it'll go anywhere. It's in the swing state, which is interesting. Not in liberal states too, not an issue. So if you're too conservative or too liberal, they don't care. So it's only, and I found that fascinating. And
victories are in the margins.
Exactly. Well, and the Oklahoma League of Women Voters this week, and I'm trying to get a hold of the actual survey, but they did a survey looking at the 2020 voter fraud complaints in Oklahoma, and there were 59 made. All but the 19 that are in Oklahoma County haven't been disposed of, but the others have. Of those, one conviction, and it was a woman who had sent in her dead mom's absentee ballot. And so one conviction. So not widespread voter fraud, but the other op-ed this week puts forth an interesting theory. And it's a new group called, or not new, it's been around for a couple of years, Oklahoma United for Progress. And Margaret Kobos is the founder, and she's writing an op-ed for us this Sunday. And she's putting forth this idea of open primaries. And her argument is that the low voter turnout is because the middle is being ignored and they're just apathy, they're not coming out. And I think she leans conservative, but she's squarely in the middle. So her argument is that if we just go to open primaries, which other states have done, more people will turn out because they'll be focusing on the candidates, not the parties.
Yes.
Which is probably why it's doomed, be honest. But it's an interesting idea that if everyone's on a ballot and you have, Joe Smith R, Margaret Smith D, the party is noted, but the top two candidates, whoever they are, they could be two Republicans, two Democrats, split, but the top two vote getters go on to the general. Her argument is that will bring more people out and the fringe will lose control.
I like that idea.
I don't know. I don't know if that's a silver bullet. What's your thinking on that?
Well, I'm appreciative that the state Democratic Party opened up their primaries.
They did.
Because at least in the primaries, because I'm an independent, I'm not a Republican or a Democrat.
Me too.
At least there's some place I can go. It's like, well, okay, I can choose between these candidates. But I don't have that ability with the Republican Party right now. And I can tell you that at least from the last few gubernatorial elections and presidential elections, there were candidates in there on the Republican side I would love to have weighed in on. None of them ended up winning, but whatever. But at the same time, it gets a little bit more power for people to campaign to all of us.
Right. Because I've seen candidates who have been in the middle, really sort of a centrist, but then because they're trying to win their party's vote, they go to the fringe, whether that's the friends of the left or friends of the right. And you don't know who these people are. Like, they're one person on social media, they're one person when they're talking to a newspaper reporter, they're another person when they're in front of the Rotary Club.
Yeah, it'd be nice to dispense of all of that and just be who you are and let the chips fall where they may. And I have a feeling you would find most people I mean, there is a thought that maybe some folks are being conditioned to support the fringes now, but we have voter turnouts right now that, like you said, with the school board elections that are extremely low, and even in these bigger general elections, especially in the off years, our turnout isn't all that hot. It's not as
No.
big as it
And those
should
are
be.
nonpartisan. So there could be an argument that even nonpartisan elections, have a hard time getting voters. So it could be just the office.
Well, and think about, and to my point, I'm saying like the general election type of stuff, our gubernatorial elections probably don't pull as many votes as they should, as well as the off-year congressional elections. I mean, they're going to get more than the local ones will, but still, I mean, our turnout, if we edge above 50% in Oklahoma in a general election, we're doing pretty good outside of a presidential year.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I think that would definitely. I also wonder too if the candidates who are more mainstream thinking are spooked to run because they just don't see they'll have a chance to win. So it sort of sets us up to have radical candidates on both sides, and there is nobody in the middle. That drives down turnout.
It's hard to get people to run. I mean, and I appreciate, even the ones I won't vote for, I appreciate that they're putting themselves out there to serve, because you get beat up a lot. And I do think that some of the meanness that has crept up in the social media trolling that some of our elected leaders put up with, it ends up being based on their, attacks on their personality or their person rather than their policy. And sometimes it's hard to recruit good people. And so we have to, when you're going out after someone you don't like, just remember that, we're trying, if you're part of the problem, then, back off, just stop being mean, I guess. But it's trying to get the more people in the center to run. And it's getting harder and harder to get that. So, but I do appreciate the op-ed that puts forth the idea. I mean, I think anything that it's worth at least discussing and debating. Can we do something in our systems that will help make voting easier? Which kind of gets to my column, which is I found there was a difference between a Pew Center report came out. The way people view voting, I've always viewed it as a right. Like I was taught when I was a kid, it's a God-given right as an American. It's your responsibility. It's patriotism. But then this Pew Center report found that there's this other thinking of no, voting's a privilege, that we can put all kinds of obstacles. And in a way, they're right. We do allow for, things to be in place, whether it's your citizenship status or your age or how long you've lived in the state. So, there's some thinking of how do you bridge that gap on how you view voting. And I guess for me, it doesn't matter. Just go vote. If you have a voting card, go vote. But, so kind of moving on, there's no good segue to this, but I was both with the health department audit coming out. It was both disappointing because of what it found, but it also was reassuring that we have a state auditor inspector dedicated to transparency, that she, they worked hard to do the audit, but then also made it available to the public and online. And Bob, I'll let you tell the backstory to that, because at least one official didn't view that audit as an open record.
Yeah. So the former Attorney General, Mike Hunter, had asked for the state auditor to do this investigatory audit of the health department, because it looked like some things were just going off the rails in terms of money being spent to mitigate COVID-19 pandemic. We spent millions of dollars on stuff that we have not seen delivered to us yet, and a lot of the things that the auditor found was like, all right, well, you had this, but it's against the state constitution to do it this way. And there were some other things where there was a lack of controls.
Well,
and on and on and on.
The other finding that was sort of interesting to me was the sole source that these purchases were made based on.
Basically a handshake deal from people who knew each other.
I think it was people that was friendly with the leadership, which is, it's an old boy network, or
women
are in there too. But
you had one part of the governor's leadership team had a personal past working relationship with an executive at Sonic who is now starting up had this company that was formed in 2020 to do stuff, and they, it was just kind of turned into a mess. So it's like, hey, probably instead of saying, oh yeah, this is a good guy, let's just go with it and circumvent any kind of competitive bidding.
Right. And that's the difference between business and government. Yes. Government has a lot of, you can do that in a private business. You can say, yeah, we'll do this. You can't. But Cindy Bird and her team did a great job in covering that.
They did. And what was interesting with this is that we knew this thing was been coming out for a while. The Tulsa World had been asking the state auditor for the report. The state attorney general seemed to want to keep the findings of this thing secret, which is interesting. You got to ask why, specifically in terms of the timing of why. Now, why keep it secret now? And
to be fair, and I want to, because for people who are listening, the Frontier made an open records request to the attorney general, and the attorney general said he was not going to release it. And I don't know why. I mean, he just said, we're just not going to release it. So that was the Frontier did that. And we had a pending request with the auditor for it too.
The state auditor's office. And the state auditor had a different opinion on this. Mm-hmm. She said very matter-of-factly that this report belongs to the taxpayers of Oklahoma, and there's no reason why they shouldn't see it. And what I thought was interesting is they didn't just give us a copy of it, and other media a copy of it, and say it's available and let the chips fall where they may. She went with the further step of putting it online. And if you look at the state auditor's Twitter account, they posted it there. It's like, we don't think it should be, we think this should be open, and here it is. Mm-hmm. So the whole public can see it, which is really the way it should be. And I find that, to me, that's very interesting, because most of the state leadership, and we're talking about the statewide offices, are fairly well, I hate using the word lockstep, but they are very unified behind the administration. The one big example we saw where that was not the case was in the state education department, and with the state superintendent, who was now running against the governor as a Democrat. So for Bird to make that step, that's interesting.
And that's why we have a vote for an independent auditor. I mean,
that's interesting.
Is independent, and I say a win for the public because that's exactly the kind of information that the Open Records Act was meant for. So,
politically speaking, I don't think that necessarily means that she's anti-stit or anything like that. All. It doesn't mean that necessarily. She might be, she might not be. I don't know. But what it does mean to me is that she saw a public duty to get that report out there, even if it makes the state look bad, because that's what she is charged to do. Gotta like that.
Oh yeah, and she was the one who pursued Epic, and they came out after her hard. They tried to get laws passed, remember, to try to restrict her duty. So, so she's been a hero on a couple of occasions so far. So
she's been one of them Sunshine Award type of people. She is getting the light on some stuff.
Mm-hmm. And to end this, we want to end on a high note. Super Bowl.
Even though my team's not in it.
That's not.
I'm in it.
It's not an opponent. That's Denver for people who can't see. He's wearing a Denver hat, but you don't get to choose them. You have
5280 all the way.
And you have the Bengals. So who are you pulling for?
Who am I pulling for? This is so hard, because I always love to see it when a team that has never won the Super Bowl gets there and they finally get over the hump. And I love the whole Joe Burrow story. And the Bengals were the worst team in their division last year. The year before that, I think they won like 2 games, and we're talking like a couple seasons later, they're in the Super Bowl. That's pretty exciting. But as my hat here denotes, there's one of my favorite players who played for Denver for years, Von Miller. He's an edge rusher. He now plays for the Rams, and I would just love for him to get another ring as well. So I am just pulling for a great game.
I am
That's all I
excited
want.
about the halftime.
Oh, really? What about?
I'm pulling for Snoop Dogg. That's who I'm
Oh,
behind.
Always pulling
So
for Snoop Dogg.
come on, you're a Gen Xer. This is like a Gen X hip hop bonanza. Dr.
You gonna
Dre,
have a
Snoop
little-
Dogg, Mary J. Blige,
You can have a little gin and
Eminem.
juice. Get a little gin and juice went on during
I'm excited
halftime.
about that. And I'm excited to get my rotisserie chicken to make chicken nachos. That I'll be happy to pay tax on. But I'm just going to pull for Joe Burrow just because I think it's a great story. And is it true? I don't know. I saw a meme, and everything on the internet's true. That there's been no one who's won the Heisman Trophy that also won the national championship and then went on to win a Super Bowl. Is that true?
Ooh, boy, I'd have to dig into that one, but that'd be a great thing.
We need to ask Barry Lewis. Barry Lewis in our sports department would know this because that would be cool. And if it's not true, I don't care. I'll still pull for Joe Burrow. And I really don't.
I'm pulling for bratwursts. We got bratwursts in the fridge that are going to be
That's a good. You're German, so that makes sense.
And some mac and cheese.
Mac and cheese, really?
Oh, mac and cheese.
You gotta have finger foods.
Mac and cheese with your bratwursts.
Okay.
Are you crazy?
Okay, I'll try. It can't be bad. It's bratwurst and mac and cheese.
It's awesome. It's one of the best things you'll ever put in front of your face.
I can't
see how that would be during a football game.
That's right. Well, enjoy the weekend. Enjoy the football game.
Yeah.
The legislative session started up, so there's going to be stuff to talk about. It's going to be crazy.
Baby, they're going to be crazy
session and an election year, so it's going to be something. So tune in next week, unless we get inspired to have a podcast midweek, and we'll let you know. So until then, have a good week.
Adios.
For more information, you can visit tulsaworld.com.